The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood silently at the tall windows of the private apartments. Her fingers traced the cold glass while she watched the groundskeepers tend to the rose gardens below, the same gardens where she and William had walked countless times, sharing quiet moments away from the public eye. Today felt different, though. There was a weight in the air that even the morning sunlight couldn't lift. William found her there, as he always did when the world seemed too heavy to carry alone. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he moved beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. This simple gesture had become their language over the years, a way of saying everything without words. They had learned that some moments required silence more than conversation. The children asked about the arrangements again, Catherine finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Louis wants to know if he can wear his favorite blue tie, the one that matches yours. She turned slightly, catching William's reflection in the window. His jaw was tight, the way it always was when he tried to hold back emotions that threatened to spill over. William nodded slowly. He should wear whatever makes him comfortable. Today isn't about protocol. His words carried a firmness that surprised even him. For years, every decision had been filtered through layers of tradition and expectation. But grief had a way of stripping away everything except what truly mattered. The palace staff moved quietly through the corridors, their footsteps muffled by thick carpets. Each person understood the delicate nature of this day. Preparations had been ongoing for weeks, but the reality of it had only truly settled in during these final hours. Catherine had insisted on reviewing every detail personally, not because she didn't trust the staff, but because focusing on the logistics helped her manage the overwhelming sadness. Earlier that week, William had found her in the study, surrounded by photographs and handwritten letters. She was creating a private memorial book, something that would stay within the family. Her hands moved carefully as she arranged pictures that spanned decades, formal portraits mixed with candid moments that captured genuine laughter and love. Some photos showed state occasions, while others revealed quiet family gatherings that the public never saw. "I want them to remember the person, not just the title," Catherine had explained when William discovered her project. She held up a photograph of a summer afternoon in Scotland where everyone was dressed casually and smiling widely. This is who they really were. This is what matters. The weight of royal duty had always been present in their lives, but it felt especially heavy now. Every decision they made would be scrutinized, photographed, and analyzed by people around the world. Yet beneath all the formality and tradition, they were simply a family dealing with an unimaginable loss. Catherine had spent sleepless nights worrying about how to help the children understand and cope with their grief, while maintaining the dignity expected of their position. William had watched his wife navigate this impossible balance with a grace that both amazed and worried him. She had become the steady presence that everyone leaned on, offering comfort to family members and staff alike. But he saw the exhaustion in her eyes during quiet moments when she thought no one was looking. He recognized the signs because he felt them too, the weight of carrying everyone else's pain while processing his own. The telephone calls had been endless in recent days. Heads of state expressing condolences, family members needing guidance on arrangements, and media outlets requesting statements. William had handled most of these conversations, trying to shield Catherine from additional stress. But some calls required both of them, particularly those from other royal family members who were struggling with their own grief. During one such conversation with his father, William had listened as emotions that were usually kept carefully controlled finally broke through. The vulnerability in those moments reminded him that titles and positions couldn't protect anyone from the fundamental human experience of loss. These private exchanges, away from cameras and public observation, revealed the real people behind the formal roles. Catherine had established new routines to help the family cope. She insisted on family meals together, even when schedules were chaotic. She read bedtime stories every night, maintaining normalcy for the children despite the extraordinary circumstances surrounding them. These small acts of consistency became anchors in a time when everything else felt uncertain and strange. The gardens at Windsor had become Catherine's refuge during these difficult weeks. She would walk the paths early in the morning, before the rest of the household was awake. The gardeners had grown accustomed to seeing her there, and they worked quietly when she appeared, respecting her need for solitude. Sometimes she carried a cup of tea. Other times, she simply walked and thought. William often joined her on these morning walks, and they would discuss practical matters that needed attention. But they also shared memories and talked about their hopes for how the family would heal and move forward. These conversations helped them both process not just their immediate grief, but also their concerns about the future and how this loss would shape their children's understanding of life and duty. The support from staff members had been remarkable. People who had worked for the family for years stepped forward with extra care and attention, often anticipating needs before they were expressed. The housekeeper made sure Catherine's favorite tea was always available. The security team adjusted schedules to provide more privacy during family time. These gestures, while small, created a bubble of comfort during an incredibly difficult period. As the day approached, Catherine found herself thinking about legacy and memory. How would this person be remembered? What stories would be passed down to future generations? She realized that while public ceremonies and official statements were important, the most meaningful tributes would happen in private moments, in conversations with the children, in quiet remembrances shared between family members, and in the continuation of values and traditions that had been lovingly passed down. The morning light was growing stronger now, casting long shadows across the castle grounds. Catherine could see members of the household staff beginning their preparations for the day ahead. Soon, the private moment she and William were sharing would end, and they would need to step back into their public roles. But for now, they stood together in comfortable silence, drawing strength from each other as they had learned to do throughout their years together. William placed his hand gently on Catherine's back, a gesture that said everything they couldn't voice aloud. They both knew that today would test them in ways they had never experienced before. But they also knew they would face it together, with dignity and love, honoring both their private grief and their public responsibilities. The morning was just beginning, but they were ready to meet whatever lay ahead. The great doors of Westminster Abbey stood open, welcoming a procession that moved with solemn dignity through London's ancient streets. Catherine sat in the state car beside William, watching the crowds that had gathered along the route. Thousands of people lined the pavements, many holding flowers or small flags. Their faces showed genuine sorrow mixed with respect, and Catherine felt touched by this outpouring of public affection. The children had been remarkably brave during the journey from Windsor. George sat quietly, occasionally glancing at his parents for reassurance. Charlotte held her mother's hand tightly, while Louis had fallen asleep against William's shoulder, despite the gravity of the occasion. Catherine found comfort in these normal childhood reactions amid such an extraordinary day. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was both magnificent and intimate. Centuries of history seemed to press down from the ancient stones, but the gathered congregation created a sense of community and shared remembrance. Catherine recognized faces from around the world, leaders, dignitaries, and family friends who had traveled great distances to pay their respects. Yet among all these important figures, she was most aware of the empty space where someone beloved should have been sitting. The service began with music that had been carefully chosen for its personal significance. Each hymn and reading had been selected to reflect not just formal tradition, but genuine memories and shared experiences. Catherine found herself remembering quiet Sunday mornings when this music had been hummed around the breakfast table, or evenings when these same verses had been read aloud during family gatherings. William's voice was steady as he delivered the tribute he had written. Catherine watched him with pride, knowing how difficult it had been for him to find words that honored both personal grief and public expectation. He spoke of duty and service, but also of laughter and love. His words painted a picture of someone who had been both a public figure and a private person, someone who had touched lives in ways both grand and simple. The Archbishop's words provided comfort, but Catherine found herself thinking about conversations she had shared with the person they were honoring. Advice about raising children in the public eye, discussions about balancing personal desires with royal responsibilities, quiet moments of understanding that didn't require explanation because they came from shared experience. Charlotte shifted beside her, and Catherine gently smoothed her daughter's hair. The children had been prepared as much as possible for this day, but she knew they were still processing what it all meant. They understood sadness and loss in their own way, but the full weight of this goodbye would probably only become clear to them as they grew older. The music swelled around them as hundreds of voices joined in hymns that had echoed through the abbey for generations. Catherine's own voice caught slightly as she sang words that had new meaning today. She thought about the countless services this ancient building had witnessed, coronations, weddings, and farewells that had shaped the history of the nation. Today would become part of that long story, another chapter in the ongoing narrative of duty and love. When the formal service concluded, the family gathered in a private side chapel for a more personal farewell. This was the moment Catherine had been both anticipating and dreading. Away from cameras and public observation, they could express their grief more freely. The children placed flowers they had picked from the Windsor gardens, a gesture that felt more meaningful than any elaborate formal arrangement. William's hand found hers as they stood together in the quiet chapel. The weight of the day was beginning to settle on both of them, but there was also a sense of completion. They had honored their loved one with dignity and grace, balancing personal sorrow with public duty in a way that felt authentic to who they were as both individuals and members of the royal family. The reception that followed was held at Buckingham Palace, where family and close friends gathered to share memories and support each other. Catherine moved through the rooms, speaking with guests who had known and loved the person they were honoring. These conversations were precious because they revealed new stories and perspectives that she had never heard before. An elderly cousin shared memories of childhood summers spent together, while a former staff member recalled small kindnesses that had made difficult days bearable. Each story added another layer to Catherine's understanding of the full life they were celebrating. These personal anecdotes meant more to her than any official biography or formal tribute could convey. The children had been included in the reception, but they were beginning to show signs of exhaustion from such a long and emotional day. Catherine and William made the decision to take them home earlier than originally planned. Sometimes family needs had to take precedence over social obligations, and today was certainly one of those times. As they prepared to leave London and return to Windsor, Catherine felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the public ceremony had gone well and truly honored the person they loved. Sadness that this chapter was now closed, and they would need to learn how to move forward without someone who had been such an important part of their lives. Gratitude for the support they had received from both family and the public during this difficult time. The journey back to Windsor was quieter than the morning's procession. The children dozed in the car while Catherine and William sat in comfortable silence. There would be time later to talk about the day, to process what they had experienced and what it meant for their future. For now, they were simply grateful to have faced this challenge together and with dignity. The evening light was beginning to fade as they reached Windsor Castle. The familiar sight of home felt especially welcoming after such an intense day. Catherine knew that the hardest part might still be ahead, learning to live with the absence of someone who had been a constant presence in their lives. But she also felt confident that they had said goodbye in a way that honored both their private love and their public responsibilities. Staff members were waiting to help with the children and ensure the family's comfort as they settled back into their private space. Catherine appreciated these thoughtful gestures, understanding that everyone who worked with the family had also been affected by this loss. They were all learning to navigate this new reality together. As Catherine tucked the children into their beds that night, she answered their questions about the day with gentle honesty. They had been part of something important, she explained, something that showed how much their loved one had meant to many people around the world. But they had also said their own private goodbye, and that was equally important. William was waiting for her when she finally made her way to their own room. They sat together by the window, looking out over the gardens where this day had begun so many hours earlier. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and the ongoing work of healing. But tonight they could simply be grateful for the strength they had found in each other and the grace they had managed to maintain throughout such a difficult farewell. The day had been everything they had hoped it would be: dignified, loving, and true to both the person they were honoring and their own values as a family. They had navigated the complex balance between public duty and private grief, and they had done so together. As they prepared for sleep, both Catherine and William felt a quiet satisfaction that they had said goodbye in the right way, with elegance and sorrow beautifully intertwined. 3 months had passed since that solemn day at Westminster Abbey, and the rhythms of royal life had slowly begun to find their new normal. Catherine stood in the same Windsor Castle window where she had waited on that difficult morning, but the view had changed with the seasons. The rose gardens were now showing their autumn colors, and the morning mist carried a different quality of light. The children had returned to their school routines, though Catherine noticed small changes in how they approached their daily activities. Charlotte had become more thoughtful during their evening conversations, asking deeper questions about life and family. George showed increased interest in royal history, as if trying to understand his place in the long line of duty and service. Louis, still young enough to live mostly in the present, had adapted with the resilience that children often display. William had thrown himself into his royal duties with renewed purpose, but Catherine could see that he was still processing their loss in his own quiet way. She would find him sometimes in the study, looking through old photograph albums or reading letters that had arrived from around the world, expressing sympathy and sharing memories. These moments of reflection seemed to help him understand how their loved one's influence had reached far beyond what any of them had fully realized. The family had established new traditions to help maintain connection with their cherished memories. Sunday afternoon walks in the Windsor Gardens had become sacred time, when they would share stories and talk about lessons they had learned from the person they missed. These conversations were teaching the children about legacy and the ways that love continues even after someone is no longer physically present. Catherine had been surprised by how much the public response had affected her own healing process. Letters continued to arrive daily from people around the world who shared their own stories of loss and gratitude. Many wrote about how the family's dignity during their goodbye had helped them process their own grief. Reading these messages made Catherine realize that their private sorrow had somehow become a source of comfort for others facing similar challenges. The official duties had resumed, but there was a different quality to public engagements now. Catherine found herself more attuned to the people she met who were dealing with their own difficulties. Conversations at charity events and community visits carried deeper meaning because she better understood the reality of loss and the importance of human connection during difficult times. One particularly meaningful moment had occurred during a visit to a children's hospice where Catherine met a young boy who reminded her strongly of Louis. His bravery in the face of his own challenges inspired her, and their brief conversation stayed with her for weeks afterward. These encounters reinforced her understanding of how personal experiences of grief and joy were woven throughout all levels of society. William had begun speaking more openly about mental health and the importance of processing difficult emotions rather than simply enduring them. His speeches at various events reflected a new depth of understanding about human vulnerability and strength. Catherine admired how he had transformed his personal experience into a way to help others, showing that even members of the royal family faced the same fundamental human challenges that everyone encountered. The relationship between Catherine and William had deepened through their shared experience of grief. They had learned new ways to support each other and had discovered strengths they didn't know they possessed. The crisis had tested their partnership, but it had also revealed how well they worked together when facing life's most difficult moments. Preparations for Christmas were beginning, and this would be the first major family celebration since their loss. Catherine was thoughtfully planning how to honor memories while also creating joy for the children. She had decided to incorporate some traditions that their loved one had particularly enjoyed, making them part of the family's ongoing celebration rather than sources of sadness. The gardens at Windsor had become even more important to Catherine as a place of reflection and peace. She had started a small memorial garden in a quiet corner where she could sit and think without interruption. The gardeners had helped her plant flowers that would bloom throughout the year, ensuring that there would always be beauty and life in this special space. Letters from other members of the royal family showed how everyone was finding their own ways to cope and remember. Some had established charitable initiatives in honor of their loved one, while others had chosen more private forms of remembrance. Catherine appreciated how each person's approach was different but equally meaningful. The children's questions had evolved from immediate confusion about death and absence to more sophisticated inquiries about legacy and memory. Catherine and William worked together to provide honest, age-appropriate answers that acknowledged sadness while also emphasizing the positive impact their loved one had made during their lifetime. Staff members at various royal residences had shared their own memories with Catherine, often during quiet moments when formal duties were completed. These conversations revealed the countless small kindnesses and personal interactions that had made their loved one special to so many people. Catherine treasured these stories because they showed aspects of character that the public never saw. The media attention had gradually decreased, allowing the family more privacy to process their grief without constant scrutiny. Catherine was grateful for this respite, understanding that public interest was natural, but also recognizing the importance of having space for private healing. The balance between public duty and personal needs remained complex, but she felt they were managing it more skillfully now. Looking toward the future, Catherine could see how this experience was shaping the next generation of the royal family. The children were learning about duty and service, but they were also understanding empathy and human connection in deeper ways. These lessons would serve them well as they grew into their own roles and responsibilities. Plans were being developed for a permanent memorial that would honor their loved one's contribution to public service while also providing a place for quiet reflection. Catherine was involved in the design process, ensuring that the memorial would capture both the formal dignity and personal warmth that had characterized the person they were honoring. The autumn days were growing shorter, but Catherine found hope in the changing seasons. Just as nature moved through cycles of loss and renewal, families also learned to adapt and find new forms of happiness after experiencing grief. The love they had shared didn't disappear. It simply took on different expressions and continued to influence their daily lives in positive ways. Standing at the window on this particular morning, Catherine reflected on how much had changed since that difficult day 3 months ago. The sharp edge of immediate grief had softened into a gentler but persistent sense of missing someone important. They had learned to carry their love and memories forward, while still engaging fully with the responsibilities and joys of their continuing lives. William joined her at the window, as he had so many times before. They didn't need to speak about what they were both thinking and feeling. The comfort they found in each other's presence had become even more precious after experiencing how quickly life could change. They had faced one of life's greatest challenges together and had emerged with their love and partnership strengthened. The future stretched ahead with all its uncertainties and opportunities. There would be difficult days and joyful celebrations, public duties and private moments. But Catherine felt confident that they had learned something important about resilience, love, and the ways that families support each other through both sorrow and happiness. Their quiet goodbye had indeed etched a lasting place in royal history, but more importantly, it had taught them about the enduring power of grace, dignity, and love in the face of life's most challenging moments.